Alright, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over my Week 3 match against Stevie and his Baltimore Oracorios. Please go check out that video first if you've not done so already, as we went over the Teambuilder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant got back on track with a convincing 5-0 victory that bumped us up to 2-1 with a +8 differential. This time we're taking on an old rival in Steve Chuck and his 2-1 +11 Waterdeep Wobbuffets. Timestamps are in the description. Steve and I go way back. It was him who made the regretful decision to invite me into the league, and as my best friend here, it's tough to see him succeed against me as often as he has. Season 2 was well fought, including a semi-finals victory over Steve. Then Season 3 included a Week 2 match where I discovered the team I ended up going undefeated with in the regular season and playoffs, thanks to Steve for that, as well as a quarterfinals victory too, where I showed off the one change I'd made between regular season and playoffs by putting Dragonclaw on Groudon as a nice little meta call. Steve also had the distinction of being our very first opponent on the channel, Week 1 of Season 4, in a 3-0 victory in which we showed exactly how to play around Ditto using some funny set ideas like Draco Meteor Kyurem B and Leaf Storm Celebi. It's been downhill since then, of course, with a very good, close match in Season 6, giving me my first regular season loss on the channel, and then an absolutely embarrassing L in Season 8 in which I filmed my NFL tryout as a punter, giving away the game in a way I'd rather not remember, but is in fact documented on the channel if you'd like the opportunity to laugh at me. Steve's dominance even continued in Season 9's multi-battle season, one of 2 coaches to win both of his matches against me, as we have gone a hot minute since a normal win against him, though we did come out on top in the semifinals of that season. So, what's the formula for success this time? We've got a tricky team to get through, starting at the top with an Archeops that has beaten me before, followed by Virizion, Dracloak, Sharpedo, Klinklang, Chandelure, then a steep drop down to Piloswine, Licky, Charjabug, Drampa, and Escavalier. The team is definitely built around that Grass Fire Water core at the top that doubles as a Fighting Ghost Dark core, and even more specifically around that, the second overall pick Chandelure. Virizion has almost perfect defensive synergy with Chandelure, Sharpedo is a great revenge killer with complementary coverage to both of them, the fighting weakness is littered through the team draw and fighting moves which Chandelure is immune to, Escavalier drops in fire moves that it's immune to, even Charjabug can get sticky webs, Piloswine can grab easy stealth rocks, and Licky has wish support. It is a pretty well-rounded, well-balanced team, but there are a few holes here that we could potentially exploit. Hazard removal is very tough to come by, relying on Defog, Archeops, and Drampa, which are tough to get in and even tougher to stick around and not attack, and even tougher to fit those moves into their 4-move slots. Archeops, Piloswine, and Charjabug are also his only hazard setters, which means Chandelure is often forced to run boots and doesn't always have the added benefit of Chip to help it break. Some shared weaknesses do make for a relatively easy time in terms of moves to bring, and the team ends up becoming quite prediction heavy as a result. Finally, those speed tiers are awkward. Archeops at 110 being at the top, and then the very obvious gap in the middle that rivals our own, going from 80 down to 50 with nothing in between. Can we exploit this? Maybe, especially if we can eliminate some threats of his from even coming. I've documented well enough what useless webs are against me, especially because I can finally bring Clear Body and Tentacruel, and Charjabug really doesn't have the right resists or abilities you'd be looking for, so I'm going to have to miss the bus on this occasion. Drampa hits very hard with normal and dragon coverage on the special side, but I actually have 4 mons that can hit super effectively even without a fairy, and outtrading it isn't a problem at all, nor is outspeeding it with everything. I really don't see it coming. We've talked and joked a little bit about Klinklang and Dracloak, but they're the absolute worst in the matchup, honestly, with Klinklang outspeeding quite a bit of my team with decent typing, and Dracloak outspeeding even more with a very annoying typing, granting it Will-O-Wisp and nearly unresisted Shadow Balls. That said, these are 20-point mons for a reason, as Klinklang can still be easily walled and revenge KO'd by too many mons. Steelix in particular is the biggest wall probably in the entire game, and Dracloak has a few choice switch-ins that could reduce it to a little more than a U-turn bot, neither of which is particularly useful in a matchup where the top 7 are all so much more valuable. Yeah, the last slot's a bit of a toss-up, and considering my propensity for knockoff and toxic and taunt, we've got a few directions you could take this. In the end, I feel even if Heal Bell is valuable for him, I'm going to say Licky is the one that doesn't come. He's really enjoyed success with it so far, but his opponents haven't exactly played the best around it either, honestly. He knows I can taunt, but Oblivious is there too. He knows I play well around Wish, and I'm going to say the big beefy boy is just not part of his game plan. That said, I don't know if Archeops is one of his 6 best, but I also think he may be worried enough about hazards that he could bring a Boots Archeops to clear away my hazard game, and me including it in the top 6 here may be a giveaway as to my strategy. There is a chance he just runs boots on things like Chandelure to compensate for leaving Archeops behind, or going a very offensive Archeops, maybe an anti-lead, or it could be another Scarf Archeops as well to surprise the Aerodactyl among others. Plus that typing is just so good offensively, I'm willing to say it comes, for sure. Escavalier seems to make a lot of sense too, and I don't have a fire type, and the fire coverage in general is pretty sparse. That Iron Defense Restus Cavalier he was packing last week, even if the Iron Defense was a mistake, is very terrifying to think about, severely limiting my answers to breaking through, especially considering it could be paired with something like Licky Licky's Wish and is immune to Toxic. I'm more worried about the top 4 though, so we'll talk about Piloswine next. Amazing defensive typing utility with Rocks and Toxic. Rest is really needed on Priority Ice Shard, or just a strong Icicle Crash. Earthquake, such a good stab move. Knockoff to wreak havoc, and the bulk with Eviolite is insane. Preventing Rocks against Piloswine is a tall task, even if Balloon Berserker showed a path week 2. Chandelure was his first pick for a reason. 145 special attack is actually insane, and Fire and Ghost typing are both difficult to resist, not to mention Energy Ball coverage and defensive Will-O-Wisp or Toxic sets that pair with it so well. That Willow Hex set is actually something that I became more and more scared of as we got a little closer to the match, using its defensive capabilities to wear down my team for something like Virizion or Sharpedo, similar to many of my own strats, or just firing off big ol' hexes. Of course, the top boys are the biggest problem. Sharpedo speed boosting past everything with 1 Protect and coverage that can come from the physical and special side even on the same set, plus admittedly lackluster priority from my side means however fragile it may be, it can still be his premier revenge killer with great offensive typing and coverage including close combat and Ice Beam for the 1 mana I have to resist both stabs. Finally, Virizion seems like it was specially made to torment my team, if it weren't for being outsped by a whole 2 mons on my side that can revenge it without a Scarf, which is a viable item for it too, by the way. Grass and Fighting are both relatively spammable against my team, my 2 Grass resists, which are both lower tier mons, and both are weak to fighting moves, and unable to 2-hit KO in return most of the time. Knockoff is common for me as a safe move, but Virizion punishes that with an attack boost in return, turning 3-hit KOs into 2-hit KOs for my best switch-ins, making them not switch-ins anymore. Wearing it down is tough with support and Synthesis plus Stone Edge or either Swords Dance or Calm Mind sets even, I thought a special set might be coming, would be absolutely devastating. For me, Clang was cut almost immediately. Steve is too good to let Clang do anything to him, even if Thunderwave from a big ol' wall seems very funny. It's destroyed just a little too easily here, or more importantly, taken advantage of a little too easily by things like Virizion or Chandelure, so no Clang. Marowak will continue to ride the bench too, actually, being weak to Hydro Pump, Leaf Blade, Energy Ball, Icicle Crash from his top mons while being outsped by all of them does not make for a good time. Really, it's been the lack of versatility from Marowak that's kept it on the bench most of the time, as I'm unable to run anything like Rindo Barrier that could have made it a surprise Virizion check because it's too reliant on that thick club damage. Next up is Rotom Frost again, despite the potential pivoting it provides against all but Piloswine. You'd think being one of the few mons in the game to resist both of Piloswine's stabs would be a boon, but for the second week in a row our opponent has a threatening, not fully evolved mon that resists both of our Rotom Frost Bolt Beam stabs, which I had been told was nearly impossible to resist. I do think Rotom Frost has merit in a different capacity than normal in this matchup, but for the sake of brevity and the possibility we play Steve again later, I'll hold off on that for now. Mesprit is incoming this week. The first time that this has happened, it was definitely a surprise to me when I realized it just couldn't come. It's one of my very best fighting resists, but it doesn't exactly do much of anything to his big bulky threats, and is decimated by Chandelure and Sharpedo and his Cavalier stabs, so overall it just couldn't quite provide enough to make it. The last one, man, I really wish I could bring all 7 of these, but ultimately the one mon that couldn't quite make the cut ends up being Frostlass. Yeah, I've complained a bit about it recently, but its matchup here really made me second guess, especially because Steve's been listening to me complain about it and discounting it. Amazing speed tier to nail Virizion and Chandelure with super effective stab moves, and an amazing matchup for Spikes. If I was convinced I could turn this into an offensive slugfest that I win every time, this mon would be ridiculously good. But as it is, I don't feel quite confident enough to bring it, particularly because of the case of 4 moveslot syndrome I've got here. Ghost and Ice coverage, Spikes, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Destiny Bond, and T-Wave all make a lot of sense here, but I don't know if I can quite build the team well enough to handle the issues that Frostlass cannot. The remaining 6 have a much more narrow focus on his top mons and what I may need to add on to counteract his own tricks. Aerodactyl, for example, already outspeeds his whole team, which he knows is a problem, but will outspeed everything with a Scarf with its own Scarf. Chandelure or Virizion or even Archeops, which I have won with and lost to before, all present problems with Scarfs, as does Sharpedo coming in to protect and revenge KOing, but they are nothing in the face of an even faster than that Aerodactyl. Ideal scenario, we revenge KO something, then with the Scarf continue to outspeed his revenge KOer and grab another one, nabbing the momentum of the entire match just like that. This also means I don't mind Arrow coming in a little earlier in the match than normal, particularly if a Scavalier and or Piloswine are either low or down for the count. I could lose a KO to something like Virizion pretty easily now too, as Dual Wingbeat has a total of Kling resists on his team, though Flame Body Chandelure could punish, especially given our contact move luck recently. Otherwise, Stone Edge is so strong, and all we have to do is just not miss. Earthquake is really solid coverage and is more accurate than Stone Edge, and finally the less risky Rock Slide. Could potentially put Stealth Rock, but I wanted to be aggressive. I don't really see a case or a scenario where I don't just click an offensive move. Crunch is pretty easily punishable, but it doesn't really cover that much. Iron Tail could have been kind of cool for Piloswine, but it has even lower accuracy than Stone Edge, which should already be doing around 40% to it anyways. And finally, Aqua Tail is a weaker option that can still hit both Shandy and Piloswine, but it can actually hit a couple of things and makes it a little more spammable. Finally, I also considered Agility briefly. If we were to get knocked off, good Agility on a Sharpedo that comes in knowing it has to protect outspeed to get the jump on it anyways, but I don't see a scenario where I leave Arrow in against something like a Licky Licky or something like that without being in range of KO. Finally, we are able to run an Adamant Nature simply by effect of outspeeding his entire team by 20 base points, so an Adamant Nature is possible, which should help a lot. The goal, of course, is to get things low enough that we can just click a single button late game. For example, again, the Piloswine is low, we can just click Dual Wing Beat. The Virizion is very low or dead, and we can just click Stone Edge. Something like that could be a nice endgame scenario, though we can also bring it out throughout the game to try and get some KOs. Of course, next up on one of these slots I was heavily debating in was this Tentacruel. Yeah, I complained a little bit ago that I was bringing it too much, that it didn't really do much in week 2, but this set really does provide something that I don't otherwise have in Toxic Spikes, as well as Rapid Spin. Toxic Spikes is the crux of the set, and quite a bit of the strategy. I don't mind forcing them to switch, as it will force poison turns onto everything but the steel types, Archeops, and potential Boots or Balloon Chandelure. Poisoning things like Virizion or Piloswine in particular can force some amazing interactions. Maybe 2 rounds of poison plus a strong move will KO. Or maybe a round of poison or 2 plus that move will bring Virizion into range of me being able to spam, say, Stone Edge or Rock Slide with Aerodactyl. And that really is the goal, especially considering Heal Bell from Licky Licky isn't going to stop them from being poisoned again when they enter, and his hazard removal does not want to eat a Scald. I only need a single layer, honestly, too, and I don't mind setting them up against a few different threats, the riskiest of which is also the one I would very much like to check most in Chandelure. I really don't have much that can check the Fire Ghost Mon, especially if I consider how risky it would be for me to swap into something like a Will-O-Wisp Hex set with anything else, including what would otherwise be my Boatified counter, which we will talk about later. When I think of it that way, this simple set may be the best switch, and I have to it instead, freeing up that other mon on my team to clean up something else with the help of perhaps the Toxic Spikes. If I swap in Tentacruel first on a Will-O-Wisp, then that indicates that is the Willow Hex set, and I can get the T-Spikes up. If the Chandelure attacks, then we can just fire off a Scald if we survive, which we do have the EVs to be able to outspeed all Chandelure that aren't Scarfed, as well as survive 2 Timid Specs Shadow Balls, and that is totally fine too. If it does attack, we can use my Dark type to absorb its hit later as well, instead as the much harder easy check. So I really don't mind having this be my plan. Scald again is consistent damage. That could get a burn on a Scavalier or chunk Archeops and Chandelure, and then of course Sludge Bomb is the damage I may need to break through the Virizion, which is definitely a theme from this team, and being able to get about or at least half off of that Musketeer thingy deer. Steve's team is mostly physical, but the Shandy I may want to check is special, so I decided I want to tank Chandelure a little better. Max HP, of course, again, we've already talked about the speed and everything, just dump the rest in defense, and I think that makes enough sense there as well. So next up is going to be the Steelix, which I'm bringing despite being weak 2 stabs from each of his top 3 mons. Hopefully I've learned my lesson from week 2 and brought Steelix regardless, as we have quite a bit to do against his other threats that could still let us get off big chunks of damage for free. Piloswine and Licky Licky in particular do not want to eat that body press, and we're surviving hits from basically everything with ease thanks to the max physical defense investment. Stealth Rock doubles up with a T-Spike strat amazingly, though it will be probably tougher to find turns to set it up in terms of what should be a very offensive matchup. They may want to be aggressively double switching out of Steelix, considering that Chandelure can come in pretty easily. Still should be a great option. Earthquake has nice complementary coverage with Body Press to hit non-balloon Chandelure in particular, and Protect may seem like a little bit odd, but last week I kind of wanted to rack up the poison damage, and this is basically the same thing happening here. So I may want to get myself up to sturdy health. I do see a world where I'm a little chipped. Maybe I took something like swapping in on Stealth Rocks, or I tanked a weak Leaf Blade, and then I get a turn or 2 and I need to Protect to get back up to full health, at which point sturdy lets me take a Chandelure hit and retaliate back. Otherwise, Tentacruel and Guzzlord are good Chandelure checks, so maybe I won't have to stay on it anyways and count on the sheer damage I do with Body Press to basically everything else. Next up, past Simian set is the one I waffled on the most, but I settled on an Expert Belt set once I saw a couple of calcs in particular. First, Jolly Max Speed to potentially speed tie the Chandelure, or just outdo it if it's modest, so a straightforward EV spread there. The one that got me most excited of the calcs, though, was Acrobatics with this spread into 252 HP Virizion, making it a clean one-hit KO at base 55 power even, which is just amazing, with Close Combat also doing around 70% as well or so. This also bumps Knockoff into possible Oko range into non-Colbur Chandelure, which is definitely a big deal, so those 2 in particular really pushed it over the edge to get to that. Those do cover most everything else I need, and EQ could have been an excellent way to get a neutral hit on something like Chandelure. U-turn as well as an amazing pivot move, but I picked Drain Punch to keep me healthy while still 2-KOing Piloswine is a cool neutral option. I don't see me pivoting out with U-turn too much, so I'm cool with the HP recovery, a remnant of a possible bulk upset I had contemplated earlier. Next up is going to be the debut of Guzzlord. Glad I finally got to use it in a big-time matchup. We're exploiting Gussie's godly coverage this time, with knockoff being generically excellent, especially for the Chandelure. Heat Crash to Oko Escavalier, as well as -1 Virizion, strangely enough. Heavy Slam does over half to Piloswine, or can do, and a cheeky Draco Meteor, which lowers our otherwise useless special attack as a way to get a neutral hit off on most anything in a pinch, as well as our only option to Oko the Sharpedo. Guzzlord is surprisingly strong, maybe because of the adamant nature and being able to throw its weight around, arriving at a silly amount of base power on these moves backs up by these stats. We're back to speed creeping as well, outspeeding a speed creeping Piloswine that is an HEV Piloswine or Licky Licky, and otherwise max attack with the rest in defense because we need to invest any more. We don't need to invest any more either in that ridiculous HP stat. Add in that Choppleberry will let us survive a close combat from Virizion, Torpedo, or Escavalier, and we can see that the goal is going to be getting a positive trade-off against anything on his team, hopefully. Some smart switching from him could neuter me a good bit, but Piloswine into Chandelure on Heavy Slam, then into Virizion into Knockoff maybe, but if I get some hazards up first, I really don't need to think too much, and could help Guzzlord get into his head with the ridiculous coverage it has. Not to mention how free Draco Meteor could become if I see him switching around, as they hit everything but the steel type so ridiculously hard. Definitely excited for Guzzlord's debut, as well as Clawitzer trying to claw its way back into the KO leaderboard race with a versatile set and the second straight resist berry for Virizion, though it can also get Chandelure's Energy Ball if that's what he's packing. Water Pulse is incredibly spammable except for Virizion, and it is easily the best revenge killer he's got too, so it makes sense for me to be able to stay in against it and click Sludge Bomb against it as well, to make sure that we can chunk it, all but the Calm Mind variants, for about half. Water Pulse hits Piloswine and Chandelure in particular. Our Sphere, as mentioned before with Steelix and Passimian, is great coverage against his team, and then the flip turn is kind of neat too. If I can get something like Piloswine really low, it can let me keep up momentum. I don't need speed because of this gap between 80 and 50 base speed, so we can go max HP to hopefully better take a Chandelure or Virizion hit. Really though, we've got quite a few mons that abuse his lower speed tiers, such as this Steelix, Passimian, and Guzzlord hitting Piloswine for over half, as well as them all hitting Licky Licky and Escavalier for about half too, so those are the mons to play fast and loose with, so that means it will be depending on the matchup we're looking at and the usefulness of the couple resist berries we have as well. It'd be nice to keep them healthy, but if they can abuse the lower speed mons, then that's what we need to do. Speaking of, let's see if we can actually take down Steve rather than ourselves this time in the Week 4 Grudge match. Finally, nailed one, that's good. Wait, no it isn't, this means this is the team that I'm most scared of. I actually hadn't thought too much about the lead originally too, but my mind may be starting to turn a corner, so I'm getting more lead slots correct here in this season. In my mind, his two hazard setters are Piloswine and Archeops, and of those, Archeops makes a lot more sense to me due to how much versatility it has in the lead slot, and Piloswine maybe being a better switch-in later. Clawitzer is actually really tempting his lead to try and Oko something, but I thought better of it, and just decided to go Steelix. Good luck to Steve, as we do see that I was spot on yet again, and it is the Archeops in the lead slot. So, why did I say that Archeops made more sense? What's the versatility I was talking about? Anti-lead sets are actually kind of crazy with Archeops, and its move pool is conducive to the lead slot too, not just because Defeatist means that it will be at 100% health when it comes out. Standardly, we could see things like Stone Edge and Acrobatics. We'd also see Boots on it with Defog to get rid of anything we set up, or Taunt to prevent that in the first place. Focus Sash and lead slot is crazy, especially with a fast Endeavor that isn't affected by Defeatist. It has its own rocks too, obviously, and could potentially switch out with U-turn as well. Finally, my favorite hidden stat on Archeops is that special attack stat, base 112, which would be second highest in my entire squad, with moves like Flamethrower that Steelix despises. Well, that's a lot of options. I did mention that rocks on the Teambuilder were kind of an afterthought, but maybe if I can keep the Archeops honest with Scarf Arrow in the back, it wouldn't be too bad. Especially using Archeops in the lead slot, it seems less likely that it would be a defog set. Body Press could absolutely chunk this guy, but if it's an offensive lead, as I think it might be, I don't think I mind eating a taunt turn 1 if needed. And you know what? Let's go for it, as unfortunately he does carry Earth Power, which is 83%, jeez. But rocks do go up at least. We do see a Life Orb as well on him, which tells me he has no special attack investment, interestingly enough. Well, we got our rocks up, but went down to 23% as a result, 24% just because of rounding there. Protect could scout another move, get me another 6% up to 30, but that's not particularly helpful if he gets up his own rocks. Not that I think that's what he'll go for, actually, necessarily. Well, I do have a ground immunity if I think he'll do it again. But that'd be so risky. Not to mention he could come in again later, staying out of defeatist range while eating a rock hit with something else, or worst case scenario, I'd just miss. With all this in mind and the usefulness of a 24% Steelix seeming just a head low, I decided it's about time to sack off my weeks 1 and 3 MVP on turn 2 of the match. Rest well, my sweet prince. Well, we're not in the best of spots here, are we? 5 options. I'm going to take the 2 berry options off the table. I want Clawitzer and Guzzlord healthy enough to be able to actually activate their berries later. A quick calc shows that Air Slash can OHKO Passimian, so that's going to be right out as well. Aerodactyl sure would make a lot of sense here now, yeah? Rock move wrench KOing him? But I don't think that's the play either. As I spoke about just a little bit ago, I use a rock move, Piloswine or Scavalier comes in and takes 30 to 35, and then Archeops can come in back in later on rocks. And what's a little more tempting to me right now is actually the Tentacruel. Yeah, I kind of wanted to save it as my best Chandelure switch, and especially as a chance to get up T-Spikes, but change of plans. I'm going to bring in the Tentacruel, and I'm going to click Scald this turn, while surviving an Earth Power. If he hits me with that, I'll KO him right back with Scald. If he defogs, I'll nail him there too. The thought being that I want some sort of hazard up, whether it's rocks or T-Spikes. So risking this damage against my other hazard setter isn't bad if it can force him down in turn, or just stop the defog on rocks in particular. Well, there is one more possibility. Head Smash does 100% to Tentacruel, deals over 60% in recoil, as well as another 10%, and Archeops is left at 8. Well, the good news is we only need to do another 508% instead of 600%. The bad news is we are already down to just 4 months to do that with 400% health left. Well, I'm down to 4.5 months. Those rocks from Steel could prove to be invaluable. The other very important thing that happened that turn is not that Archeops got reduced to life or recoil range, but to stealth rock range. I have no problem bringing in Aerodactyl now to revenge it, because Archeops can no longer switch out and then back in. He's out of hazard removal, and we know he has a life orb, not boots, so he just cannot come back in, and these rocks are going to be permanent with the Aerodactyl switch in. So, dual wing beat is just going to be my play here. I just wanted to make sure that I could hit a little better, and just in case he goes down to a cheeky, say, Scarf Frizion to take the obvious rock move that's coming in, I just wanted to use a safe flying move. We are going to connect, and we are going to move into a 4v5 situation with rocks up. It's a bit early to take a look at the board state, but with Piloswine coming in on those rocks, there has been so much action, we may as well do so already on turn 4. We're down to just a few 100% healthy pieces each, reduced by Stealth Rock, assuming that Shandy and others are not boots. If not, that's some super valuable chip, actually, especially if we can get them to switch around a little bit. It's not quite the poison strategy, but it'll do. For me, Scarf Arrow still looks very good, but I really do need to force down some chip with the other boys. These are the best 3 members of the team to do so. This isn't the absolute worst spot, I think, even with me locked into dual wing beat against a healthy Piloswine which really wants to Ice Shard or Icicle Crash me. My options are thus Clawitzer or Passimian, but I love seeing how much damage Passimian does to everything, so I think he is going to be my option, and he is going to switch in on the light screen. That's interesting. We see a switch here real quick, but don't worry about that. So this isn't like the Trick Room game where I just skipped over it. Screens are incredibly unlikely in the game, considering the onesie-twosie nature of who gets on his team, aside from maybe Chandelure, but light screen Piloswine, it's rather valuable against Clawitzer, admittedly. Good thing something told me to go Passimian in particular. Could have been the possibility of knockoff. Could have been me wanting to keep the Rindo on it, I'm not sure. Whatever the case, Steve's logic was that the Monty expected me to bring in on Piloswine were my water types that were special attackers, making light screen the easy play. It's a cool little tech. We got the W on that one for switching in Passimian. We're going to need to keep getting W's down a full mon. Chandelure could come in on a fighting move, but I think I'm going to have to go it. I'm going to click the close combat into the Virizion, as we can see, taking a valuable amount of chip damage, 64%, which is a lot. And it does actually indicate a healthy amount of bulk as well, interestingly enough. My original prediction was some speed with max attack and HP otherwise, and that still holds up. Now I've got minus defense and special defense in the close combat. However valuable that chip was, this is not the greatest spot, so it's time to switch. Well, into what exactly? Aerodactyl makes some sense. Wait, isn't the time to make a play right here? Actually, he may think we're Scarfed at this point. I haven't swapped moves. He's not going to risk that Virizion on Scarf. Isn't this the time to play to that fear and stay in? It's possible he stays in sword stances too if he thinks that I'm scared of being outsped and KO'd. The other option is going into Chandelure. The middle ground play for me, if that's what I expect and I want to take advantage of this, is going to be Acrobatics, even if that means an Adamant Virizion will KO me with the close combat. I'm going to take the risk. And I'm going to get rewarded big time with the Chandelure switch, even if I only do 21% plus the 25% from Stealth Rock. That is not a negligible amount. That's Stealth Rock chip and almost another round, so we will take those. Some very important things to note then. That's not a Scarf and Virizion, though we didn't see the item. Also important is that this Chandelure is not Boots either, nor is it Balloon. The two items I became increasingly worried about as we got close to the match. With lefties removed to 2, I think we're looking at one of Shucka or, more likely, Colberberry. Potentially a choice item, though I really don't think so. That attack from Passimian actually reveals a significant amount of bulk on Chandelure too, possibly max HP, so there's a good chance we do outspeed. The issue is that I put Drain Punch on instead of Earthquake, which looks pretty silly right about now, doesn't it? Chandelure survives a knockoff if it's Colbur and punishes back with, well, anything honestly. If it's that Willow Hex that I thought about, then I really only have one answer. Unfortunately, it could be time to make useless the Rindo set on Clawitzer, as he appears to be the only switch I have. We're going to have to go into it. I'm going to admit, I did actually fist bump a couple of times in the match, calling the Clawitzer swap in on Willow. This was the one I remember most distinctly. This fist bump was such a clutch call, figuring out that this was going to be the Willow Hex set. I do not outspeed this obviously, but I don't know if he wants to stay on a Clawitzer. Even with light screen up, I'm going to do a crap ton. Could still have Energy Ball, but he could also just switch, and he could also just Hex. No matter how you slice it with light screen up for another turn, I think the only play here is going to be get the slow pivot out with Flip Turn. After that little bit of chip, Hex does come out and brings me way too low to be useful against anything but a Scavalier. Unfortunate that the tech didn't come up, but it does let me go into Aerodactyl for a cute little revenge possibility, as well as bringing Chandelure down to 40%. Enough for only one more switch in. Interesting indeed, though I think I'm just going to have to do this. Now, the only safe play for me against the Chandelure is going to be Earthquake, even if Virizion may be coming in on this. But Clawitzer being low does provide an amazing sack outlet later in the game. Earthquake is the play, as Piloswine is going to switch in yet again onto rocks and take another solid 22% from that as well. Well, this is a fine mess, isn't it? If I'm Steve, I'd probably Icicle Crash here to claim a KO. Well, Passimian actually survives a hit from it at least. I think I'm going to need to try to force a KO here in some way before sacking Clawitzer. I want to be able to stay at least a round even or just one down in the KO game. So I think I just have to go into Passimian and risk taking all that damage from it. Icicle Crash, miss. That really is nice. We'll see how much that skillful dodge matters later in the game for sure, but for now, we're at full health. Actually, Drain Punch is kind of a neat option here to still KO the Piloswine. We did see it's probably just max HP investment from the earlier hit on it with the Earthquake. Of course, Chandelure can come in on a Drain Punch, and as we can see, that is in fact what's going to happen, but here we are. It's at 15%, huh? I didn't touch on it too much before, but I've been playing with fire, pun intended, quite a bit with this match with Chandelure. I think all three of its abilities have merit in the matchup. I don't have Fire type, but a telegraphed coverage move, especially on Scavalier, can be eaten up by Flash Fire. An Infiltrator is actually great for the screens I brought week 2, and the substitute sets that Steve and others know I tend to favor. But the scariest one by far is Flame Body. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. My worst enemy is a contact ability here. Chandelure, I did actually find out, this is Flame Body. Whether Steve told me afterwards, or we're about to find out here, is the question. I got an Acrobatics off in Chandelure earlier in the match for the Passimian. No burn. I EQ'd into the Chandelure with Aerodactyl instead of Dual Wing Beat because I didn't want to risk the burn either. I don't have a choice this time. I need to click Knockoff this turn to Chandelure. I'm pretty sure I outspeed it because the damage from Hex made it look like it was modest, as well as the bulk investment. I don't think this has much, if any, speed on it at all. If I'm Bird, oh boy, does the value of Passimian less. Maybe there'll be a little bit of justice too if the Icicle Crash miss. That'd just be a huge piece that I may need to break through a Scavalier or Piloswine, as well as a liability to let him set up a little bit, or get that speed boost with Sharpedo. I'm going to click Knockoff. He's going to stay in. Get the KO, because it is a Colbur. And he does not burn us. Thank goodness. I actually made contact twice with a mod that had an ability that procs on contact. Did not get the 30% chance either time. Just under a 50% chance of making it through unscathed, but we got it. We may see how much that matters too, but for now, it is of course going to be the answer of Virizion. That makes a whole lot of sense. It seems a little suspect in a sense because, well, it can get a hit off onto Passimian, but I do kind of destroy it in kind, right? What's up with that? I mean, I wonder how different this would have been if the Icicle Crash had hit. Either way, I do see the chance to get an arrow again for some big damage, and I have now accomplished my main goal. So I think I just need to sack off Clawitzer to this thing now. Unfortunate that the Rindo Berry and Reflect? What the? Another screen? Well, afterwards, Steve said that the natural complement to Piloswine luring in the special water attackers with light screen, was Virizion luring in physical attackers with reflect. So honestly, in theory, that makes enough sense. So what if this is a light clay Virizion? We know Piloswine's EVO light, so it can't have the light clay. We know from the earthquake damage. We haven't seen an item here yet. That's a bit concerning. And Clawitzer is, of course, going to go down the next turn to just a standard Leaf Blade. Proccing the Rindo Berry. Went down. I have exactly one move left that hits on the special side. Shout out to Guzzlord's Draco Meteor. Guzzy is full health, as are the other two, actually. Virizion's pretty low at this point, and Piloswine into Rocks brings it below half, with Sharpedo and Escavalier at full health after Rocks is about 7/8. There are a couple possible ways to win here, I think, but the biggest obstacles I see are thus. Escavalier, especially behind Reflect, is really tough to bring down. It could actually survive a couple Stone Edges or close combats, depending on investment, not to mention the Reflect, and an Occaberry could help it survive a Heat Crash. That may require a couple of hits to bring it down. A couple of hits I don't know if I can afford to make. Virizion and Sharpedo outspeed Passimian and Guzzlord too, though each can survive a move thanks to Bulk, and with Guzzlord the unpopped Berry, which is good against almost everything left. Piloswine and Sharpedo could have priority left too, meaning I need to keep my answers at least somewhat healthy. Finally, Aerodactyl may not be able to KO that Piloswine, and definitely not Escavalier, and especially not if it's Shell Armor, so we need to be careful about an endgame sweep with Arrow. The next couple turns will determine the game, what strategy will emerge. No matter what, I absolutely need to go to Aerodactyl this turn against Virizion. It is the only thing that outspeeds it, is the only thing that can KO it without taking a big old close combat hit or anything. So what's the worst case scenario here? I think it's him saving Virizion to get another big close combat off against a slower Mon, taking negligible damage with Escavalier or Piloswine through Reflect in the process. This may seem risky. I think I need to go into Passimian this turn. We've seen this happen a couple times where he goes into, say, Piloswine takes a hit, and then we're able to pivot around until he can get something else low. There's going to be a point where I just can't switch out with Aerodactyl anymore, and if his walls, especially Escavalier, are healthy enough that I can't take a hit with anything else, that's the worst case scenario for me. So again, the suspect play here is to go Passimian, but I think I need to risk that just to see if he's going to swap out and do something like that Escavalier and see if we can get a big ol' hit off on it. We do switch first, that's fine, and he stays in close combats. Oh no! That reduces his defense stat, but he's just going to be able to outspeed in close combat again, and that in fact is going to be what he does. That was not a low roll or anything. Oh, that was the wrong play, wasn't it? I don't know if I should risk my still somewhat speedy monkey like that. Well, I know we're down 2-4 now, but let's think about this. Reflect is about to go down, isn't it? There may still be a way out of this, depending on what Steve decides to keep or sack, and actually getting through that Reflect with all these physical attackers left may have been the best case scenario, in a strange way. It seems he's intent on sacking the Virizion. I really don't have a choice but to go into Aerodactyl here once again, of course. I just can't switch anything in. I could hope that close combat was just a high roll. It wasn't. So now how much damage is it doing to Aerodactyl? A little too much. So I don't know if I can really afford to stay in and click a rock move. Even if it KO'd this, it would just introduce the same problem of something else coming in. You may have realized it by now, but a win con has emerged. Yeah, I don't think it's the Aerodactyl. I haven't brought in Guzzlord yet. Piloswine's chipped enough that Heavy Slam KOs him, and the EVs. I need one of his close combat mons to go down. Not the Escavalier. I need one of the other two to go down, so I can tank one. Though it isn't a guarantee he doesn't swap into something else this turn to save Virizion. He does not. He sacks the Virizion to Aerodactyl as Reflect goes down. 2v3 as we are reaching the end game, which for maybe the first time all match, now that Virizion is down, it seems like I feel good about where we're at. We've actually got a little bit of a shot. The answer for him is going to be a Escavalier. Man, why couldn't you just bring in the Sharpedo? Go into the Sharpedo already so I can show off the Scarf. He knew there's a chance of the Scarf, unfortunately, as I also know that there's a shot this Escavalier has Occaberry. I need Guzzlord at 100% for whenever it comes in. I need it healthy. I cannot believe I'm saying that. I need to use dual Wing Beat here just to get it in range of a Heat Crash just in case of Occaberry. After Rock's damage, dual Wing Beat will in fact connect. Solid little bit of chunk that confirms max HP, but Ironhead does indeed just finish it off. Yes, this was the right play, and we'll see why in a bit, I think, if everything goes right. I really don't have any options left, so into Guzzlord we go. So my 40-point mon attempts to take on 3 members of Steve's team, all of which are higher point value than mine, but at least Reflect is gone. Here we go. We're going to have to heat crash into the Escavalier. No Akaberry. Escavalier is down. Done. Beast boost doesn't matter too much here. That's fine. Steve's got a solid endgame plan here. He's going into Sharpedo first because he wants to chip Guzzlord into Ice Shard range. He knows he can't Oko me, but he just needs to get me low enough for Ice Shard. Couple of things about the interaction between these two. I have a Choppleberry, yes. But it isn't guaranteed that close combat is the coverage on Sharpedo for me. Ice Beam would be way more devastating at this point. Nailing the uninvested side with a move I don't have a berry for. Mixed is actually pretty likely too, considering my Steelix tanks liquidation pretty well. So Hydro Pump or Surf is definitely an option on here. The other awkward bit is my mostly physical moveset. Knockoff, Heavy Slam, Heat Crash. Sharpedo may be fragile, but it resists all of those. It actually would have required a second Beast Boost to get it in range of these moves. My other move of choice is Draco Meteor, which I picked over Outrage so I wouldn't get locked in as a one-time option. This is that time, and there's actually a chance he's invested or not Life Orb, in which case Draco for my minus special attack nature might not KO, especially the Ice Beams instead to keep his stat intact. Most importantly, Draco Meteor is not 100% accurate. The only bit of hacks in this match has gone to us already. We need 2 more turns to go our way. This is going to be the first. Close combat, yes, we eat that up. And Draco Meteor, after the Life Orb and CC drop, will connect. Guzzlord KO number 2 as his 100-point Mon goes down. My heart, man. Oh, okay. Pile of Swines as the last Mon. Coming in on rocks for the final time. Without the Choppleberry, I'm brought in range of Ice Shard. But we don't have to stress over that. As it is, I'm well out of range. This requires Icicle Crash that it missed earlier to hit me. How much did that matter? I sacked the Passimian anyways, but it was still important to take Reflect turns away, and I also dodged the Flame Body procs. But if Icicle Crash did less than 50% anyways, no matter. Hacks mattering or not, this is it. It comes down to this. For me, Heavy Slam is a clean KO. Potentially a roll in my favor with Piloswine at this range, but at +2, we're doing at least 80%. I think an even higher roll than that. For him, Icicle Crash actually is a slight roll, though very much in his favor, about a 12 and 16 roll for him. So he could hit, flinch, and priority Ice Shard too, or miss. Actually, that's the last, most important point of this all. You may have seen this coming for a couple turns now, as I did too. But we're actually going to come down to the cheekiest part of the team building process. Guzzlord's speed investment. If you'll recall, Piloswine has base 50 speed, whereas Guzzlord, being an Ultra Beast, has a prime number as its base speed. In this case, a measly 43. That is definitely slower than Piloswine, but I'm not fully invested in defense. That would have actually helped this roll, both against this and the earlier close combat, but instead I invested a good amount of that into speed. Do you remember how much? A pretty healthy amount, actually. Enough for a Piloswine that invested 8 EVs into speed. You see, often Mons go 252 into their attack or defensive stat. I found out later this was indeed Adamant Max Attack, and 248 into their HP stat. 248, you ask. If you know a little bit about EVs, you might be asking, why not 252? Well, an odd number HP is important, specifically one that is above a number divisible by 4, or below a number divisible by 4. Specifically, to be able to switch in on Stealth Rocks, or for others, it's to get a number that lets you substitute 4 times and still have 1 HP remaining. This is true for Piloswine too, who has an even number of HP at 252 HP, 404 overall, and an odd number at 248. All this to say, I anticipated this Piloswine may have 8 EVs exactly to dump, and just in case Steve put them into speed, I put enough not to outspeed 0 speed Piloswine, but 8 EVs in Piloswine. That's why I had to risk the minus special attack nature with Draco Meteor, why I'm not max defense and now in range of these moves, and, as I've tried to set up, the reason I may win. 1 point, 1 hypothetical speed point, is that what it comes down to? Steve did invest in speed, actually. 8 points of speed. We outspeed Piloswine by a single point, grab the final KO of the match with Heavy Slam, and emerge victorious 1-0. Wow! Good game to Steve Chucks. We finally get over the losing streak with an absolutely clutch win. Definitely game of the season as far as I'm concerned. It'll be really tough to top this one, that's for sure. Archeops put in so much work for him early game, defeating my main strategy of setting up the toxic spikes, but not preventing rocks, which actually ended up doing 125% of his team's health, notably 50% onto Chandelure to get into range of knockoff, and 37.5% to Piloswine, who swapped in several times, actually potentially ensuring the KO at the end, as well as taking away the potential roll against Sharpedo at the end too. That trade does seem worth it, as does sacking Tentacruel to the head smash to ensure Defog couldn't get off. Still happy with Tentacruel even if it doesn't appear to be doing much each week. Clawitzer also went down unceremoniously, but was the only thing I could possibly swap Willow into, which was super clutch, then forced Chandelure out by getting the slow flip turn into Arrow, then sacking 2 turns to Reflect, so still a valuable piece even if it couldn't keep up in the KOs department or appear to get anything of value off. That Chandelure I found out was max defense and special attack, a weird set that still definitely worked to deter my knock until I could ensure it would KO through the Colbur, another decent call on items. Pessimian broke through that Virizion, perhaps ensuring that it would have to be sacked later, and picked up the KO on Chandelure with knockoff, and most importantly, was the main facilitator of Stealth Rock damage, a duo piece with Steelix in the match to force switches against the low-speed Mons by threatening things out and chipping with its natural power, as well as Stealth Rock, a potentially sneaky MVP pick after that great play of bluffing Scarf by staying in on Virizion, or even buying 2 more turns of Reflect late. Speaking of that, Virizion was crazy. I learned it was actually packing Kabaya Berry for my poison coverage, as well as some speed creeping of his own. If my Tentacruel just outsped Chandelure, which it did, Virizion only had enough speed for that, the rest going into attack and defense. Of course, my speed creeping mattered a little bit more, but this was definitely a strong Mon, taking out Pessimian and forcing out Aerodactyl to take care of it, and it could have potentially ruined my Guzzlord endgame too if he had swapped it out. Instead, Aerodactyl became one of my most valuable members throughout the game, yet again, coming in 4 times throughout the match instead of being saved for the end, which definitely worked out for my benefit. Chipping Piloswine and grabbing 2 crucial KOs is the most threatening thing to come onto the field for most of the game. Sharpedo, on the other hand, didn't really get a chance to come out at all, however scary something like Flip Turn could have been. Luckily, his revenge KO opportunities were few, especially with how wary he was of Scarf Aerodactyl, which turned out to be a correct feeling for him. The Scavalier was looking a little impossible to take down, especially with the Assault Vested head-on, which makes me feel a little bit better about sacking the Clawitzer earlier to Chandelure's Water Pulse is probably doing about as much as Aerodactyl could do. Piloswine was Light Screen. Man, that's weird, right? Traditional set of Stealth Rocks could have been game for me, ringing Arrow into Ice Shard range potentially after a couple switches, and putting Clawitzer in Hex KO range mid-game, and also missed an Icicle Crash that may have mattered? It seems like it may have, but ultimately I don't think it did. Maybe in conjunction with the Flame Body could have mattered. But what would stand in the face of the real MVP, Guzzlord? Seeing the Guzzlord endgame was awe-inspiring. I definitely remember chuckling to myself when I realized my win condition was not only going to be Guzzlord, but that it would depend on the speed investment from Steve's Piloswine. I audibly popped off when I learned Steve put exactly 8 speed EVs on Piloswine. Such a hype moment to finally get over the hump. We still got losing streaks against both John and Chad, the latter of which we face in the final week of the season after he just picked up our old friend Arctivish. For now, though, we've reached the halfway point of the season, finishing the first half 3-1 with a +9 differential, good for a top 4 spot in the league with the Bouffalant, which would ensure us a first-round bye. We finished at 5th at the end of the regular season last time, though even if we're doing better in Season 10, we've got an absolutely monstrous gauntlet awaiting us in the final 3 weeks of the season. After an off week here in the middle, we've got our last matchup against a 500 below team as we face off against Fish and his Cleveland Castforms. We'll see ya.